morning. Thank you, everybody. All right, so I will be presenting today. I'm working as a peer specialist in rural Idaho and managing ethics in rural communities. See if we can get this to move over. There we go. So I'm quickly just going to go over a little bit about me, just so on that I've had some of these experiences working in rural communities. I'm going to go over the code of ethics and professional conduct. I feel like the professional conduct also goes with ethics, and it makes it so that you are able to provide and adhere to ethics. We're going to discuss cause and effect of limited resources in rural areas, and then the ethical challenges for mental health professionals in rural areas, and then best practices for peer specialists. Along the way, if you got any kind of questions, please post it in the chat. I do like these to be open, and here we go. So just real quick about me, it's not about me, but just so you guys understand, I've been a peer specialist since 2014. I'm currently a OP department manager at a Body Mind Health Services. So I manage peer supports, family supports, youth supports, and then also CBRS and case managers. And I work closely with counselors. When I was a peer specialist and then working out in the community, I share my experience as being a veteran. I served for 10 years in the Army. I'm also queer and I happen to be married. And so going out into rural communities, sometimes that can be a little hard. So I have to take that into effect when I'm working with people. I use my experiences in overcoming obstacles, serving in the military, being gay in Idaho, addiction, loss of friends due to suicide, and aging gracefully. My experience also includes case management for a crisis center in Boise. All right, so we're going to go over, I'm going to go over, no, we're going to over the code of ethics and professional conduct. And I'm just going to read through them and kind of share how they apply, just simple examples. So there's 16 code of ethics and professional conduct rules to maintain. And so the first one is we as peer specialists, and I'm going to use peer specialists for all of it. If you're family support, if you're recovery, if you're youth support, or any other, we're just going to use peer support as the blanket statement. So we role model recovery. So when we're working with clients, we want to show what recovery looks like. We're practicing good self-care, we're reaching out to help, and we're doing what we can to maintain our own health. That way we can provide the best care when we're working with people. We respect number 2 and 3. We respect the rights and dignities of those they serve, and we respect the privacy and confidentiality of those they serve. So this means you don't have to agree with what people's beliefs are, but we do need to respect them as individuals. And as peer specialists, it's our duty to also ensure that their privacy and confidentiality are always protected, and it should be open conversations when you're out in the community working with them. 4 is openly share their personal recovery stories with colleagues and those they serve. So that's one of the best things about being a peer specialist, is the ability to be able to share. When I do train people, I do let them know when you are sharing, share just enough to where you can connect with the client, share just enough that you can show empathy and you have understanding, share just enough so that the client working with you feels safe. You never want to share too much where the appointment or your time spent with them becomes about you, because that time that you set aside with the client is about them. Number 5, you want to maintain high standards of personal conduct and conduct themselves in a manner that fosters their own recovery. So that goes along with 1. You can't role model healthy recovery if you're not already having high standards. And so for me at the time, that was going to meetings. For me at the time, it's maintaining our medications. It's me at the time reaching out for help. And if I got overwhelmed, it was learning how to ask for help and utilizing the support team of my coworkers. Number 6, never intimidate, threaten, or harass those they serve. Never use undue influence, physical force, or verbal abuse with those they serve, and never make unwarranted promises of benefits that those they serve. So this one is key. Hopefully when we all decided to join this field, if it's not a peer specialist or any other field, we did it because we have good intentions. We wanted to pay it forward. We have a general desire to help people. We like that. I just enjoy just working with people. I like to meet them and see them and reach whatever success they would like to reach. It's easy sometimes to feel empathy for somebody and wanting to make them promises, but I've learned a long time ago, don't make promises. When I work with people, we work on troubleshooting. So instead of making a promise that we'll make this happen, we say, hey, we're going to see what happens. What do you think's going to happen? Let's try this. And if it doesn't work out, how about we troubleshoot and see how we can have the outcome that you would like to have? And then if we're threatening and harassing clients, for one, I would hope that maybe you look into yourself and see maybe if this is the right field for you. Two, if you happen to work with coworkers and you see this, you guys have an ethical responsibility to report it. And if you feel uncomfortable, you can go to a supervisor and that supervisor can manage it. But we should be watching out for each other, that we're not causing harm to other people. Number 7 is do not practice, condone, facilitate, or collaborate with any form of discrimination on the basis of ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, national origin, marital status, political belief, and or mental or physical disability. So I shared earlier here that I do identify as gay. I am married. When I am working with clients, it's not about me. I'm aware of my surroundings when I go out into a rural community. If I don't make it about me, it doesn't become an issue. I meet the client where they are at, and we just work on their recovery story and building it. And if you show kindness towards other people, they'll show it back in return. And then if it's not a good fit, then just, where am I going with this? Sometimes it just might be too much that you can't work with somebody because their personal issues do bother you too much. Then advocate for them and get them a new provider. Doesn't mean that you're a bad provider. It just means it's not a good fit. Number 8 is never engage in sexual, intimate activities with colleagues or those they serve. I would hope this is a given, but this is quite often something that does happen. And we get close to people, we care for people, we develop friendships. I mean, that's what our peer support, it's friend support. So we have to learn to maintain that boundary. It's okay to share our stories and it's okay to be open, but we have to remember that we're professionals and we can do serious damage if we engage in those activities with clients because it doesn't become about them, it becomes about you, and it's not about you. 9 is do not accept gifts of significant value from those they serve. A lot of times when we're working with people, we're teaching them, we are working with them to learn how to be friends. They're learning how to set healthy boundaries. Sometimes people, everyone has a different kind of love language. Some people's love language is giving gifts, buying things for you. You really need to really say no. It is not advisable. It makes it to where then it becomes about the money and it becomes about the gift and not about the client that you're working with. And then it also opens up expectations that it might happen again. And then also likewise, we don't give gifts in return. We don't exchange money with the people that we work with. All right, 10. Do not enter into dual relationships or commitments that conflict with the interests of those they serve. So in general, this one is super easy, but as we're going to discuss throughout this, in a rural community, that can be hard because the communities are small and there are chances that, you go to the same church as you go to your counselor, you go to the same grocery store. The chances of not running into somebody is very slim. And so having a dual relationship in rural communities can be a little tricky. That's where you're going to have to set up guidelines. You're going to have to set up rules. I generally say when I'm working with somebody and they see me in the community, I said, I can't be friends with you. Please don't be offended. If I see you in the community, I'm not going to come up to you because I want to respect your privacy. And please know that I'm not ignoring you, but you're welcome to come up to me. And when I've worked with clients in rural communities and they've seen other people and had dual relationships, they had to have those uncomfortable conversations about boundaries of what is acceptable in the relationship and what is not acceptable. 11, do not abuse substances under any circumstances while they're employed as a certified peer support specialist. I've seen this quite often, and so please, when you're practicing your own recovery, please do not use any kind of substance. If you feel that you are, please seek out help. If you're employed with an agency, they should have some supports there. If not, there's other supports out there. But also, if you notice that in your own coworker, or if you have an employee that's showing this using substances, please report it. Reach out. You're not getting them in trouble. A lot of time it's a cry for help, and maybe they need some support. So reach out to a supervisor, and maybe you can have that conversation and getting them some help. 13, ensure that all information and documentation provided is true and accurate to the best of their knowledge. So this is just documenting. Anytime that you're working with somebody, you want to indicate the things that you've done. If you went out into the community, the conversations you've had, you don't need to go into too much detail. You just need to indicate what you did. And when I'm working with my providers, I always tell them there is a high chance that you can be called into court. So think about that if you feel like making up a note, because there might come a time where you're going to have to testify. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to have to testify about a lie. It's never happened to me, and hopefully it never will, but keeping honesty within yourself, holding to yourself a high standard of being ethical and how you write information and how you provide services is only going to make you a better person. Your own recovery story is going to be better, and it's also going to make you a better provider. So 14 is keep current with emerging knowledge relevant to recovery, and openly share this knowledge with their colleagues and those they serve. So I would hope that if you guys are working within an agency, that you guys are staying up to date on the latest, like where's the latest recovery news for alcohol or narcotics? Where's the latest crisis center that a client can go to if they need some support? What are some approaches? So, you're struggling working with a client and you're not sure what to do, you reach out to somebody and a counselor, and they give you some advice on how to approach a client, and it's a new way of doing something. Share that. It only makes you better. And once again, if it benefits the client, it's going to benefit you. 15, remain aware of their skills and limitations, and do not provide services or represent themselves as experts in an area for which they do not have significant knowledge or expertise. I do see this quite often, and sometimes it's just a learning experience. We have such a desire that we want to help, in my personal opinion, that sometimes we forget and overstep. So as a peer specialist, when I meet with clients, I let them know that I am not a counselor. So if you're experiencing suicide, if you're experiencing self-harm, if you want to hurt somebody, I'm a court-mandated reporter. I'm going to have to talk to somebody. I'm going to have to report it. I can't give advice, but as a peer specialist, I could share my experience and things that I've done in the past that has worked for me. But I'm willing to work with you to troubleshoot to see what might work for you. For me, I don't have the training to put forth being somebody other than what I am. I feel like that's too much responsibility for myself. Peer support, the guidelines are out there. We have all had training. Just keep to your job and what you know best. 16, do not hold a clinical role and do not offer primary treatment for mental health issues, prescribe medicine, act as a legal representative, provide legal advice, participate in the determination of competence, or provide counseling, therapy, social work, drug testing, or diagnosis of symptoms and disorders. A lot of times for us, when we are working with people out in the community, for legal services, I make a point when I'm setting up services for all types of clients that we are not legal experts. Our job is just to get you connected to the legal resources for the people who can answer those questions for you. And as a peer support, sometimes that's not within your scope. And so you can let them know, you know what, I'm not a lawyer, and what I can do is how about we get you set up for case management services, or how about we make you an appointment with this local legal agency, and maybe you can get a free consult, and maybe they can provide the information that you're looking for. I learned a long time ago, back in 2014, when I was taking the peer support classes, we didn't focus on people's symptoms, or we didn't focus on people's disorders. And so I make a point that when I meet people, it's them, it's who they are. Everybody's an individual. Yes, some disorders have similarities, but people are still unique. And if I focus on that, then when I'm working with them, that's all they are, is the diagnosis that they have. And people are a lot more than that. And so I try not to make that the main focus. I do try to be aware of it. That way, when I am working with them, I can be aware if there are some issues, and it makes me a better provider if I can do some research on like maybe certain diagnoses require you to talk to them a certain way. Maybe it requires you to act a little differently, like keep your distance, not be so close, whatever it might be. And once again is obviously prescribing medication. This one I've seen where some people have shared medication, so that should be in there too. No sharing of medication. Sometimes we have a desire that we want to help people, but our role as peer supports is if you recognize that a client might need some help with medicine, you can make a suggestion. There's med managers out there, there's the ER, there's their primary care doctor. Encourage them to seek help. We can't make people take medicine, and sometimes people overtake medicine. So just be their advocate. Cause and effect of limited resources in rural areas. So now we're going to go over what some of the effects are of this. So working rural communities, there's a lack of resources that exist and stigma that discourages people from getting help. And so for me, a rural community is like out in Weezer, out in Parma area. I'm from big cities, so to me, that's pretty small. Lack of resources. So a lot of times they might not have a counseling agency. If there is a counseling agency, maybe they're only open 1 or 2 days a week and they're during hours that you're not available. Maybe they don't have the ability to have telehealth services because internet is very limited out in that area. Maybe there's no local hospital. Maybe there's no AA meetings or NA meetings that they can go to in person. And then a lot of communities, they're small community because they have a lot of things in common. A lot of them go to the same church. There's a whole cultural, social thing that goes where people just, you live in the community that you're comfortable with and you like the guidelines and you like the rules. And so maybe in that community, they discourage people taking medicine. Maybe they discourage people seeking out help. So as a peer specialist, if I were to be working with individuals as such, I would get to know the person I'm working with first. I wouldn't make that a primary issue. I would work with them on learning who their resources are, who are their safe people that they can go to, what can they do, how can they access internet? If they can't go to a meeting in person, can they do a meeting online? Are there different various support groups that they can go to? How far can they drive? Do they have gas money to drive out to the nearest town where there might be a counseling agency? Is something I can do to help them get into counseling, and maybe also set them up with additional services. Maybe they need a case manager. There's plenty of agencies that do go out into these rural communities. We do, and sometimes it's hard to get people out in person, but we are able to do telehealth at this time, so that is an option. There are higher rates, and number two, there are higher rates of suicide, addictions, and substance abuse. If you're in a community that encourages you not to reach out for help, and if there's a stigma, then it makes it hard and people self-medicate. People try to find a solution to handling their problems. And so, yes, there will be higher rates of suicide, addiction, and substance abuse. Number three, rural residents are more likely to live in poverty, report poor health, lack health insurance, have a chronic health condition, and or be employed. So not only are you dealing with the stigma of being in a community, you're also dealing with the limitations of the client that you're working with. Their biggest thing was reaching out for help. You are the person that they reached out to. They might, be living paycheck to paycheck, might not be able to afford food for the week, health insurance, maybe their services they're getting free, or maybe they got a grant or they're in some sort of program that's paying for these services. And so they have limited time that they can work with you to work on their goals. Chronic health conditions, when people are depressed, they have chronic health conditions. They're just more susceptible to being sick. And then also they also do have medical conditions that make it so it can be difficult. So for instance, somebody who's on oxygen out in the community, you want to get them out, but they can't go up because they have oxygen. I think that one's self-explanatory. Number four, Limited access to mental health services often require traveling long distance for appointments with mental health professionals. This one we do quite often see. Gas is super expensive. Services are far away. Um, Sometimes, you're working with people that can only go because they can't go to an appointment while their kids are in school, or they only have certain days off. Or some of your people that you work with might work 7 days a week just trying to make ends meet. As a peer specialist, I would become creative. I would reach out to my support team and find out from case managers, hey, is there any agency that's helping out with gas vouchers? Is there any kind of transportation support we can get for this person? Maybe they can seek out a different mental health professional that might be closer. Are they offering telehealth services? So sometimes when you're working with clients, they might seem stressed and they might seem like, oh my gosh, this is never going to work. Your job is to role model recovery and calmness. Your job is to role model problem solving and that it's going to be okay. And the answer might not be the exact answer you want, but we're going to troubleshoot this and we're going to give you the help that you need. But you're not promising it. You're saying we're going to troubleshoot it. Never promise. 5, agencies that do service rural areas have limited staff, high turnover, and long wait lists. That is very, very true. Gas is super expensive. Working out in the rural communities, staff do become burnt out because there are limited resources and you are dealing with stigma from the community they live in, and a lot of times the stigma from the family members. There is a long wait list because it really is hard to get providers to drive out to those rural areas. I remember I, at the time, wasn't married. I didn't have any kids and I didn't have to worry about rent. It was okay for me to drive 1 to 2 hours to go meet out with a client, but not everybody has that opportunity. We as peer specialists, we have our own families, we have our own bills to pay. And so we have to recognize our limitations. But the beauty is, we also provide telehealth services, and hopefully some other agencies do that as well. So you can always work out an arrangement with the client. I can come out once a month and then the rest of the time will be telehealth services, or set up a certain limit. The wait list, there's nothing we can do about that. All you can do is encourage them to, if you just have to wait, maybe find alternatives. Let's say if you're working with a client in the community and they want to have counseling services and there's a long wait list, you guys can explore websites like NAMI. You can explore the other websites that provide counseling services that are online that maybe they can access and utilize in the meantime. Okay. Number 6, moreover, individuals in rural communities tend to value self-reliance, which can discourage seeking help. So that does happen quite a bit. So rather than ask for help, they feel like they can take care of them themselves, and a lot of times they can't. My experience, though, is that's generally, and this is not a statement for everybody, but I found in my own experience that if I'm working with a peer specialist, a peer client out in the community, they are wanting the help. They recognize that they need the help. It's generally the family members who are encouraging them to become self-reliant. And so I try really hard to empower the peer specialist, the peer client, to practice good self-care. What does self-care look like for them? I advocate for them for having a voice of their own and to recognizing their own needs. And sometimes we have to work around family members, and it's not being secretive. If they're an adult, if they're encouraging them to be self-reliant and they don't want them to leave the house to go to a meeting, a support group meeting, there's plenty of meetings online. There's plenty of ways that you guys can provide services and work around things when you're dealing with stigma and other people. Ethical challenges for mental health providers, professionals in rural areas. So one is overlapping relationships and dual relationships. You have pastors, ministers, teachers. A lot of people go to the same store. They might be your neighbor in the rural area. Out here in Boise, I don't experience that, so I don't know what that's like. So I can imagine if I was out in the rural community and I came and sought out for help and people knew who I was, I would be afraid of my secrets getting out. I would be afraid of my not having any kind of privacy or confidentiality. So I make a point when I'm working with clients, when I first meet with them, ask them, who are you comfortable? Who are you comfortable talking to? What are you comfortable talking about? What is safe? What is not safe? What do we do if we go out into the community and you see somebody you know? Do we turn around and walk away? Do we talk to them? Dual relationships, you know, the, your doctor could be going to the same church as you. And I think it's easier in the bigger setting, like in Boise, to set up those boundaries. But I also believe for peer clients, it's our role to teach people how to be friends. It's our role to teach people how to advocate for themselves and communicate their needs and how to set up boundaries. And so this is a great opportunity to show your recovery and how you practice good recovery and show them how to advocate for themselves. And you guys would come up with guidelines, rules, practice it. Number two, alter boundaries between mental health providers, caregivers, and families. That just goes along with the one. People sometimes overstep. They want to be overly involved. Um, boundaries are, boundaries aren't always set. Either the client themselves doesn't respect their own boundaries and allows other people to break their boundaries, or family members have too strict of boundaries, or there's many different reasons why boundaries can vary. This, once again, it comes down to a conversation, educating people on what boundaries are and what does a boundary look like for that client. Three is difficulties maintaining patient confidentiality. This one is very, very, my experience with this one is I'm going to use the refugee population. I've worked with some refugees who struggle working with interpreters. So it's a small community and they're always afraid that their confidentiality is going to be broken. And to some degree, it does get broken. And so once again, this goes with boundaries. And so let's say I'm out with a client and we're out in the community and we're having a good time. And all of a sudden we meet up with somebody and they want to know who I am. Before we even get to that point, before we even get to the store, the library, or wherever we're going, I'm going to talk to them and say, hey, if we go out into the community and someone meets you and they want to know who I am, who am I? And I said, I can't tell them who I am. You're more than welcome to. So I've had clients to say, hey, this is my worker. They're working with me. I've had some people say I'm a friend of the family. I don't engage. I allow for the client to say who I am. And then some, or oftentimes when I've worked with teenagers, they like to make up things like the cousin of the mom's friend. And I just kind of go along with it. It makes it fun for them. Um, Four, limited support for mental health professionals to seek ethical advice. There is limited support in the sense of if you're out in the rural community, there might be limited resources of like mental health professionals or doctors or a priest, a counselor, somebody that you can go to who should be practicing good ethical advice. But it doesn't mean that it's not out there. So if you're working in a rural community, but you're out here in Boise, or if you're working in an agency or volunteering, hopefully they remind you. Hopefully they provide constant training on ethics. I know that we have to do CEUs once a year and for peer specialists, and ethics is one of them. And I know as my time has grown being a peer specialist, I've gotten better and better at it. I every ethical boundary has been tested. And I'm only able to maintain professional conduct and ethics is because I have experience. I have good role models. I have people that I can go out to. I have counselors that I can talk to. Generally, when I'm working with a peer client, I'm not the only provider. They might have a case manager or a CVS provider. Or they might have a med manager. So I'm coordinating with them. Basically, what I'm saying is if it seems like there's limited resources, there's always a way to try to find resources somewhere while also protecting the client's privacy and confidentiality. There's high burnout. So number 5 is high burnout of mental health providers. Yes. This is for many reasons. Maybe a provider is not practicing good self-care. Maybe the person they're working with is triggering their own trauma. Maybe there is, maybe the peer support is Maybe they're new at this and they're not sure where all the resources are and who they can ask for help. The key thing is when you join an agency, just try to find the supports, get to know the counselors, get to know your boss, get to know who the good people are to reach out to for support. If you find yourself getting burnt out, maybe you need a little day off. Maybe you need to rearrange that appointment. Maybe you need to reschedule. And sometimes maybe it's just not a good fit with you and that client. So once again, you can advocate for that client and try to get them a different person to work with. And maybe your job and your role in their life was get them to this point A, and the next person's going to get them to point C. All right. So I just went over ethics and the code of conduct, and I kind of gave some examples. We're going to go into a breakout room for about 15 minutes. Use this opportunity, you guys, to talk about limited resources in rural communities affecting your ability to do your job. So this can be if you are yourself going out into the rural community, if you're providing telehealth services, if you're a call agency and people call in for like a support group or a helpline. How does this affect your guys' ability to do your roles? And I don't do the breakout, Mary does.
Okay, I'm getting it set up right now. And 28. Okay. Everybody will be going into the breakout rooms right now.
Here we go. All right, I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully when we share again, I'm able to bring up the slides. So might have some technical difficulties. There we go. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully there were some good conversations. Does anyone in any of the groups like to share what you guys discussed?
I would, if that's okay. We had some good conversations about particular circumstances. I was able to share one of mine, even in Boise, but kind of the idea, same thing of a rural community, like a crossover within a church situation, and how I managed that with my participant, and even within an agency, kind of in its own, like a larger agency that had all the workers, case management, med management, therapists, how even that could kind of be in its own right a rural community idea of like this crossover, or are we going to share here? Are we going to participant maybe shares that? And I don't know, just how the ethics and the boundaries end up coming into play, and all the time in so many different ways, trying to follow the right thing. And I'm grateful we have those laid out, just to always have those in my mind as my reference. And yeah, it's interesting. They're everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Since having to do that, and I imagine you've had other opportunities too, do you find that you become more aware of the ethics when you continue to work in the field?
Absolutely. I mean, I always have my own, my own measuring point for sure, that I try and, to live off of in all branches of my life, all aspects of my relationships, and how I would like to be treated and what's right and wrong. But most definitely, yeah, it can become very intricate as you're, within several, when we get any groups of people, I think, with the he said, she said, or they said, or do we, if there is a situation, are we empowering our peer to advocate for themselves, or then resisting that temptation to want to run in and jump in for them, or everything. It's just so much with making sure I'm, first of all, honoring the peer led, heart of my whole job, being a peer support, is allowing them to be empowered to do that. And but no, I'm grateful. I've had many opportunities to practice the ethics and boundaries for sure.
Well, thank you for sharing. Really appreciate that. Does anybody else like to share? Either comment on what I believe your name is Carrie has shared, or add what you guys spoke about in your guys' group session?
I would just like to add, like what we discussed in our session was that we really need to go ahead and lean on our communities for our resources. And one of the ladies in there, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, shared that she relies on like Facebook to find resources. And I thought that was a great resource that maybe not everybody thinks about, is that Facebook has like these groups like where I'm from, we have Idaho Falls Blessings, and there's a lot of these different groups out there that we can use for resources. And I think a lot of people don't realize that Facebook could be a resource, and we are definitely coming into the times where things like that, like Facebook and all that, are really, really utilized. So if we could utilize that in our roles as peer supports and family supports, I think that would be great.
That's actually a really good resource. And then also coming back to the ethics part, how would you guys practice ethics and on confidentiality and privacy?
I honestly think that encouraging our peers to go ahead and use those resources, maybe not us asking for our peers, but encouraging them to do that. And I know one of the problems that kind of came up is that a lot of people have like a lot of pride, and they are prideful and don't want to ask for help. But a lot of these groups have rules against like making sure that nobody says anything negative, or making sure that nobody puts anybody down for asking for help. And then sometimes you can even post anonymously. So, you know, even if that is something that people are a little bit afraid of, or are a little bit too prideful, I mean, they can post anonymously. So just encouraging our peers to use those resources and not doing it for them.
Very insightful. Thank you, Athena, and great advice too. Anybody else have anything they'd like to share from their group, or something they've learned, or an experience you've had?
I know that we in our group we was talking about going to recovery meetings, 12-step meetings as a recovery coach. But do I go to meetings in other areas? However, with me and my specific role, I'm the only recovery coach in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So I work with people from all over Western Idaho, people in Boise, people in Nampa, Caldwell, you know. So, you know, some of the people I work with only over the phone, some through telehealth, some one-on-one in person.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always the probability that no matter what meeting I go to anywhere in this part of the state, I'm going to run into someone that I've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
And just letting them know beforehand that, you know, if you see me at a meeting, I'm at a meeting for myself. On the other hand, say I've been working with someone who hasn't ever attended a meeting. I have let them know that I will be at a meeting, at a specific meeting. If you want to show up at that meeting and come up, if you want, I can introduce you around. That's on you if you want me to do that for you. But while I'm doing it, I'm not doing it as a recovery coach. I'm doing that as another person in recovery.
And then how have you found being a recovery coach and doing this? And thank you, by the way. How has that helped your own recovery and role modeling your recovery?
I am not the same person because of it. You know, I shared a story. I had started working with a young lady who had never been to a meeting. She was on like day 1 or 2 at the time that I had talked to her You know, this is like our third meeting at the time. And I happened to know that there was going to be a women's retreat that weekend. And I told her, if you are really serious about this, show up at this women's retreat. And I even told her to look for my wife, because my wife would be there. And she would introduce her to people and help her out or whatever. And that was 4 years ago. She hasn't missed a women's retreat since, and she celebrated her 4 years at the women's retreat this year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Craig. I'm glad you're out there helping people. Listening to you reminds me of like my own recovery. Just a little sidebar. I used to be so nervous and so afraid to talk to people that they made me a greeter in an AA meeting. It was terrifying. I just would shake and quiver, and here I am presenting now. So you guys, this stuff works. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share? An experience, how you guys might apply ethics, how it helps your own recovery, and, you know, especially like working in rural communities or any community.
And nowadays, anywhere in Idaho, I don't even care if it's in Boise or not, it's still pretty much rural, at least as far as the ability to provide resources.
I would agree with you. I do. And then, so let's have just one quick discussion, and then I'll move on to the next thing. So have you guys found yourself, this is a difficult conversation, but I feel like it's one that always needs to be had. You're working out in a rural community and there's higher rates of suicide, addiction, and substance use. How do you guys manage, I don't know your stories, but how do you guys manage your own recovery so that you don't get burnt out? And how do you manage sometimes the lack of resources to get people support? I know for me, this was extremely, extremely hard. And I would have to do this statement every time I left. I said, I've done all I can today. And I'd have to be, I've done my due diligence. I've provided the support I can. It's their choice if they want to use the services or not. But the suicide and the addiction and the substance abuse ate at me a lot. And that was a learning experience that as I've gone up, I've been doing this for 10 years now. It's gotten a lot easier. Does anybody else have a similar experience or want to share?
I actually took my recovery coach training in 2014 as well. It took me about 3 years to get into the profession, and I started off in Twin Falls.
Thank you.
And,
Go ahead.
and since then, I've worked in Twin Falls, Nampa, Caldwell, Boise. You know, so I've been around and I've worked with enough different agencies, and, you know, from every one of those agencies, I've gotten more people that know me, you know, so even if I'm not at work, I still have the list of resources I can reach out to. You know, anything from counselors that I'm familiar with, you know, actually more friends with, MOUD providers that I'm friends with now, you know, so I think I have a little bit more than typical, being well versed on what kind of resources are available.
Mhm.
And it's still never enough.
Mhm.
You know, I've also supervised people from Soda Springs all the way up to Coeur d'Alene, supervising other recovery coaches. So I've got a lot of this has become all about networking.
I like that you mentioned that because anytime I do go out into a rural community, I try to find out what resources there are there. And if I'm ever in a situation, I know that there's 211 that I can call for information. There's 911, and then there's also 988. Those are some support lines for some help. Before I move on, is there anybody else that'd like to share?
I think for as far as the self-care, and I was very fortunate to have a really fabulous supervisor, like really grounded in peer support. And going through the couple of the most challenging for me of thinking it was I had to save this, I had to do this situation, thinking misthinking, but at the time I have to make sure this is having a supervisor continue to say it's their choice, ask them what they want, it's your job to not save that, just to remember. And it in those contexts of just the heartbreaking situations and and recover, that's part of these processes with recovery as far as substance abuse disorders and things, is the heartbreak of we can't save somebody, no matter, we can't make, it's ultimately up to them. We can provide the tools. I need to make sure that my self-care is in place so I can still stay that self-care or that support for someone else. But I'm very glad very fortunate I had a supervisor that really kept reinforcing that to me. Just this is where it is. And it just starts clicking in. I still think it would be very difficult if there was a lot of it's heartbreaking to watch, and sometimes you just have to make sure we take care of ourselves for sure and get the support and the therapy, whatever I need to make sure that I'm maintaining and managing, and because we're human too, and those things are very, very hard. But and the more training I take myself has helped, even though I'm not an expert. I've had this training, the first aid training, just little pieces of these trainings all the time somehow will kind of jump in play when I'm in the community or these things are happening, and something will automatically that I've learned along the way click in. Oh, go ahead and ask how somebody, or do you feel suicide? Do you feel like, learning how to approach things differently with, that kind of combination of knowledge and support for myself. And just like you read in the beginning about peer support, our part is to stay educated and things as they come along, as all these, information's available. And I find education also very, very paramount in all of this and managing things well.
Thank you. Very insightful again. Thank you, Carrie. All right. So the next step is we're going to move on to the next slide, and I'm not technology smart here, so I'm going to see if I can do this. Bear with me one moment. Share this screen. Share. You guys see the screen?
We don't see the screen. It's trying to do it, but it's not showing it. Oh, there it comes. There it's up.
Okay. So the next thing is best practices for peer specialists. And so these are some guidelines that have helped me. These are some guidelines that when we're training our own providers to do services, it kind of just supports them. And this section will be short, and I'll try to talk a little longer, and then we'll go into another breakout, have some good discussion. Hey, Cheyenne says, just to piggyback on Carrie, I totally agree that having a supervisor who genuinely cares can make all the difference. That is very true. Very, very true. All right, so remember, and this is all part of the best practices, is also part of the code of ethics and the code of conduct. So peer specialists should draw on their own experiences and stay within their scope of practice. So meet the clients where you're at. I myself happen to have a degree. I'm a case manager. I'm a CVS provider. I'm also a peer support. Within my own scope of practice, because I do work as a case manager, I have knowledge of certain things that I'm able to share. But I also recognize that if I'm doing case management and my role is a peer support, I'm going to refer them to a case manager. I'm going to get them to the support where they can actually have case management services. So I know my limitations. I know what I'm capable of doing, what I'm not capable of doing. I'm able to set boundaries and have conversations with them. And I'm teaching them and advocating for them to learn how to reach out to help to other people and how to use their voice. 2 is maintain the professional code of ethics when working with peers. I love the fact that we have to do CEUs every year. I think this is a good reminder. I think sometimes we can get too comfortable in our roles. Sometimes, you know, you'll be working with clients and you definitely know that you're keeping the code of ethics, but then there's always that one like, man, this person could be a friend. And that's where you got to keep yourself in check. It might be fun to be a friend, but you're here to help them. And I teach code of ethics all the time. I don't ever want to violate anybody's rights. I don't ever want to take somebody's trust away. Like it took them a lot of courage to ask for help. And for me to break that ethics, I mean, can you imagine the amount of damage that's going to do to that person? And I keep talking about healthy boundaries. So number 3 is have conversations of what healthy boundaries look like. When I first started out, I didn't have those healthy boundary conversations right away. And it made it harder when situations came up. And so along the way, I've learned with my own practice that I am a professional. I am providing a service. I'm good at the service that I'm providing. And so when I first meet with somebody, I'll go over their goals or I'll create their goals with them. And we'll create those boundaries and we'll have those uncomfortable conversations. That way, when things do happen, I've already set the standard. I've already opened the door open so that I can have those uncomfortable conversations, and uncomfortable conversations happen every single time. I have never not had a client where there was not some sort of uncomfortable conversation, and it could have been uncomfortable for the client or uncomfortable for me. Once again, number 4, there's like a running theme here. Continue to keep up with ethics and continuing education. So we also have to do, I believe it's 10 hours of CEUs for peer support. And one of them is ethics, but we also have to do 9 or 8 hours of the other ones. Find things that are pertinent when you guys are doing your training. If you're working out in the rural area, or if you find that a lot of your clients, you know, they're having similar issues and you just seem to be struggling and it's just making it hard for you and you're starting to have burnout, look up some CEUs on maybe you need to change, you know, how you think about things. Maybe you need to get some individual, some training in some different areas. It's good to change our views on things. Sometimes we get stuck, and for us to get unstuck, we need to learn new ways. Number 5 is stay in contact with licensed mental health professionals who can provide guidance and support for all things ethics and code of conduct. And I should have also put in here, you know, there might not be a licensed mental health provider. Let's say you as a peer specialist happen to work in the rural area and there isn't none. Do you have a trusted friend that you can go to that has good standards and good morals? Do you have I always say pastor, but a pastor. Do you have a minister, a priest, somebody that you can go to? Sometimes a doctor. You can set up an appointment and maybe they can provide some support. At my agency, we always check in. I make sure that if my providers have the tools they need to do their job, and if they don't, we try our best to provide them the tools. And then if a crisis situation comes up, my concern is the provider. And yes, my concern is the client, but I need to make sure my provider's okay because they also have many other clients and we need them to be successful there. So I always ensure that, you know, they, you know, do the EAP program. I ensure that they, or at least know about it. I'll have them connect to a counselor. I'll encourage them maybe sometimes to take a day off and do some self-care. Let me see if there's another. All right, so this one was short. Before we go out into a breakout room, does anybody have anything they'd like to share? Yes, self-care is a big part of avoiding burnout. Thank you, Craig. I've been burnt out so many times. I consider myself a long-termer in this field. This is a high burnout rate, and I've been doing this since 2012. I don't think I'm going anywhere. But there's been many times that I've had to take little breaks, take some time off. Many times I've had to seek out help, and a lot of times it came down to my boundaries weren't as firm. I was respecting the boundaries of the client, but I wasn't respecting my own boundaries. And once I practiced better self-care and recognized what I need for me to be a better person, maintain my own recovery, and work with people was, better boundaries.
One thing that's always been hard with me is working with clients who decide to ask me to be their sponsor, which obviously I can't be. But that conversation's always a very uncomfortable one, especially when knowing that peer well enough that I might add to their recovery because of my own life experiences in ways that a lot of other people wouldn't be able to identify with me.
I can see how hard that is, but I also think how amazing that is. They got the courage to ask for help.
Yeah,
They got the courage to go to a meeting with you. They got the courage to admit that, yes, they do have a substance addiction problem and they're learning how to ask help, and they asked you to help them. And what a great role for you to be in is you can then work with them. And I'm not telling you how to do your job. This is just how it plays out in my mind. You can show them how to pick out a good sponsor. You can show them who the good people are, who has a good program, who runs a good program. And once again, I'm thankful that you're in the field that you're in. Thank you. All right. So we're going to go out into another break room. So I realize this is almost identical to the first question. So just talk about like some of the things, working with clients, burnout, how to, having unhealthy, learning to be uncomfortable and having conversations that are hard with people. Having hard conversations with employees, like if you recognize a fellow coworker that is breaching ethics or some sort of code of conduct, like who do you guys go out to? And the question is, how have I had to manage maintaining ethics and code of conduct when working in rural communities? So we'll go ahead and break out into a rural community. You guys are welcome to discuss that. I'd love to hear what you guys share afterwards, but also feel free to talk about some other things that are related to this topic. And we are good to go, Mary.
Here you go.
Welcome back. I hope there were some good discussions. Does anybody from the group have anything they'd like to share of what you guys discussed? Nobody?
I'll share then. It was a great discussion, I believe. Got to kind of touch base where everybody was at and what their experiences were in these kind of different situations. And Tammy showed a really great experience, lived experience, which is always such true indicators of what can happen and where the ethics, and just kind of how she shared what happened, where she was at internally in a work situation, and then how she handled it, kind of her thought processes, how the agency handled it. And just, it was, they're get really nice this is just my takeaway though, of having this backdrop to fall on, to measure by measuring stick, this is kind of the code of ethics, besides just my personal judgment or my personal opinion on something about what somebody's doing or not doing, but having that ethical code to fall back on and go from there and kind of base things on. It gives us that decision making, or trying to understand and what I'm basing something on, instead of just nothing. So I found what she shared, her experience was very challenging, I can't imagine, but it was great. She was able to share her lived experience and how that worked and how the ethics worked in it all.
Very nice. Thank you.
We talked a little bit about what I work with my spouse at the same crisis center, and Um, there was one other person that worked with his spouse at different times. We talked about setting those boundaries so you don't get burned out when you're dealing with the client all day long and then talking about it. You're both talking about it at home. Remembering that even though you're spouses and you have these conversations, you have to separate that and continue your life outside of work and not bringing it all home with both of you.
Very true. Thank you, Ricky.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings me to my next point. I do believe that ethics and code of conduct go hand in hand with self-care. So realizing if you've had a hard day, you're working with clients, some of your own boundaries were tested and you had to step outside your own comfort zone to maintain the ethics and code of conduct. How do you guys practice self-care? How do you make it so that you can go see them again the next week? For me,
I have a lot of different things that I can do and a lot of tools I continually to add, finding ways, because all I know for myself is I'm such a proponent of education and things. LinkedIn is a resource I've been able to discover in my new position where I'm at currently and take a lot of learning opportunities through them as well, even, just that obviously it's not going to be CEUs, but trying to add to communication skills, trying to add to whatever I'm feeling I uncomfortable with. I try to address that way. Support is one way for myself to know to accept support and then to continue to add education to those things. And for myself, I've got spiritual practices that are very important to me that I rely on solely for myself that I need help greater than myself to help me through these things and, to give me guidance. So I just continue to add to my repertoire because all I know is if I'm uncomfortable or feeling emotional, say, so to speak, either way, it's my job to find this peace within myself. And I'm going to keep finding ways and ways to try to support gaining that peace within myself, that peace of mind. So I'm able to be, to serve my participant or, who I'm working with. Because if I'm up in the air or have personal feelings or bad feelings, I think it's my job to address them and find a way to make peace or do something different then, or I'm not going to serve my job well.
very insightful. Thank you. I agree with you. I do the same thing. I also know that when I first got into this field, I tried many different forms of self-care after working with a client. I'd go to meetings, I would cancel the next appointment. I was feeling stressed out and whatever. I did all kinds of things. And it took me some time to figure out that I just had to say a statement and I need to go for a walk. And the walk can't be a short walk so that I can I can process getting out that stress. So I always say, I've done all that I can today. I've done my job. And then if I'm triggered, I'll just go for a walk. And that seems to help out a lot because I talk to myself when I walk. I don't care if people see me and see me talking to myself. Anybody else?
That self-compassion seems so much for me, my own self-talk. Always, if I can maintain that compassion for myself and for others and have that vantage point, then it all works peacefully.
Thank you. Looks like Rachel says that she tries to achieve a goal of walking a mile a day. That helps energize body and mind. 100% agree. Carries into journaling and walking. I love journaling. It's hard to get people to journal though. I've tried to encourage people that I work with to journal and I've yet to make it really a thing.
I also just wanted to share that I am still like seeing my counselor, and I feel like that helps a lot. I mean, it's every other week, but it's still like whatever I have like just held in, I can like share it all there. And I feel like when I first started doing peer support, I really, really struggled with boundaries, and I still struggle with boundaries because it feels icky to me. It feels like I am not allowed to, because that was just how I was raised. And so like being able to turn back to him and also my supervisor, like discussing boundaries and like them validating that it's normal to struggle with boundaries, and also like giving helpful tips on how to maintain the boundaries. And that ultimately is like the most self-care to me, because then I feel empowered. I don't know, but yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Very insightful. I'm glad that you're sticking out with counseling as well. I am as well. I think it's needed. I completely forgot what I was going to say. It's because I was reading the prompts, the chat. It was very important. Anyways, I'll think of it. Does anybody else have anything they want to share? Dell likes to spend time in South Hills with family and walking dogs.
Something I do for self-care that helps me is just checking in with my coworker, and sometimes hearing the things that I'm struggling with, like getting our clients to keep their sessions or things like that. And she's struggling with the same thing is helpful to hear. So it's not just me. So for me, it's just checking in, seeing how my coworker's doing, and just, kind of mentoring each other and keeping each other upbeat and positive. So to me, I include that into my self-care, supporting each other.
I like that. Thank you, Tammy. Mary and I were talking earlier. So, I imagine a lot of us have our own trauma stories, have our own recovery stories as to why we're in this field. And, I had my intentions of paying it forward. But as I'm working with clients, I realize that a lot of them don't have the same problems as I do. And I don't have the lived or the experience that they are experiencing. And I have nothing to draw upon to help them. And so I've learned to be uncomfortable. Learn to be like, it's okay that I don't have the answers. I'm not required to have the answers. I'm just supposed to troubleshoot with them. I'm supposed to maintain my boundaries with them. I'm supposed to maintain ethics. And, it's, I took that burden off of me of trying to fix things. It made my job a lot more enjoyable. And I wear many, many hats, but peer support has been the most rewarding and fullest job I've ever had, and I will continue to stay a peer support. I recommend this to people. I think it's rewarding, and the people that provide this service, you guys are amazing. Yep.
Danny, there's
love
quite a
that.
few comments in the chat, starting at about 10:46 with Clayton.
Ooh. We can go back up. Taking baths with bath salts and bath bombs. Very cool. Russell likes art, music, gardening, being in the wilderness. Calling my sponsor. Very cool. I have a Craig. We don't want Craig's took off. Spending time in the South Hills with family and walking dogs. I love walking dogs. That's right. Carrie made the statement, I can't care more than my clients do. That's totally right. All we can do is provide the information. They have the choice to choose if they want to use it or not. We don't work any harder than them. This is their recovery. This is their story. This is their life. We just do our best. Let's see. I'm going to misprint it. Indiara, I think is your name. I give, I'm losing this chat. Here we go. I give journaling as an option, but I'm one of the few who does not enjoy journaling. Yeah. I just assumed, coming into this field that everybody would want to journal because I'm an avid journal. And so that's a perception and something I've had to put aside. So when I meet with clients, I meet them where they're at. And When I'm with my coworkers and I'm encouraging self-care or I'm providing some training, you just meet people where they're at. And so journaling is totally okay if you're not into it. A lot of people actually don't want to do it. I'm a lot more understanding than I was many years ago. I read, walk. Amy says, I read, walk, listen to music, meditate, yoga, bubble bath, and diamond paintings. I'm impressed by diamond paintings. I never have the time to do diamond paintings. I'm impressed by people who can do them. Dina likes the check-ins. Dina loves lighting candles with the smell of amber in them. It's kind of like aromatherapy, and it puts my mind and body at ease. Very true. When I was out in the field, I don't necessarily work with clients anymore. I very seldom do, but I used to carry lotion that was comfort for me. So, if I was feeling stressed out, I'd go wash my hands and then smell the lotion. Not in a weird way, just in a way that was comforting. Cheyenne likes puzzles. I think that's it. We got about a few more minutes. Does anybody else have anything to share? Nope.
I know that from where I'm working at now, and I'm so thankful. Kind of a premise upon all of this is our foundation and intentional peer support, and the wealth of information, reviewing and studying intentional peer support itself really helps set all this too in context for having conversations, and for it's not my job to save somebody or to be this service. And it's really provided a lot for me as well. I highly encourage anyone that's interested, to kind of go to that website and really watch some videos on intentional peer support again, and all that stuff. It's really helpful for me.
Thank you.
I have something. And so I actually work in the school district. I'm a family support specialist and I work in the school district. And so I would really encourage everyone to reach out to the schools, because some of the things that we do, like with families and doing activities, we did a health fair and we brought resources into the school district, into those small communities. And so I would encourage you guys to reach out, because I know that there's a lot of community schools going on and popping up in the state of Idaho, and supporting those families and those kids. If you're not sure what resources or where you can do, I would just encourage that. So when I shared with my group, we did a health fair, school bell. We did a health fair, and I had brought in drug and alcohol counseling. And so when one of the kiddos, he had ran away and he was on drugs, and the sister didn't know what to do. Well, she was talking to a drug and alcohol place that had come into the district, and she called her parents, like they were able to find him and get him into treatment. And so like having those supports and reaching out, like if you're not sure, like some of this stuff, sometimes reaching out to the school district can help. So I just would encourage that for others. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm gonna start sharing that too when I'm training. It's something that never occurred to me, so thank you for sharing with that. Got about 5 more minutes. We're about done. Cool. Well, I want to say, and ask another question, but we're about done. So thank you guys all for attending. I'm thankful for those who shared and those who shared in the chat. And for those of you who also just attended, I really appreciate you guys being here. I also want to thank Empower Idaho. This has always been a bucket list of mine, was to present, and I totally recommend it. If you guys ever get the opportunity, please try it. It doesn't, Mary is amazing. She works. That's the first time I did this. I was so nervous. I was shaking and I was sweating. And this is my 3rd time, and I had so much fun today. So highly recommend it. Thank you, Empower Idaho, for all that you do for us. And I'm glad you're out there. You're a major resource for all of us. And if there's no other questions, we still have like 5 minutes, but Miriam, I think we're done.
I have one off topic, like just in general, if I can stay after maybe for 1 second, or just present it now. It's regarding, because I know you said for like up to 2 weeks before we got a certification, a certificate. Is there any way I need to turn in to get my peer license renewed within the next, when I can get a certification? Is there any way I could help that process speed up along at all, or so I have that to put on my validation that I took the CEU course and the ethics course? I know I can't rush you, but I'm asking if I can rush you somehow. I don't know. Be on the list.
I like how you put that. You're not rushing me, but you're
But I
rushing
am.
me, huh? So, Carrie, I'm going to put our email in the chat,
Okay.
and email us. And before I go any, oh, it looks like Brandy has a question.
Go ahead, Brandy. You're muted.
Is that better?
Yes.
So I think I've had you in an ethics class before this, and I think you do a great job. But one time you were talking about that you're good at notes. So I was thinking maybe you could present something like the note class we talked about that one time, because that is a very topic that I keep asking Empower Idaho to kind of do, because the words, how to take, I know it's generic, but just to get us a refresher for our CEUs, that would be helpful with our supervisors. Some don't know everything about peer support either. But anyway, it's just a thought for you, because you're a good presenter. So,
Thank you.
I
So,
agree. Case notes, I really, really could use some help with that.
Brandy and Charlotte, go to our website, and Eden, if you could put up the link to our peer support conference page, that would be great, because the last peer support conference we had a whole session on case notes. And so the slides are there. It's full of information. The presenters were, yes, the slides are there and the recording is there. And Eden put the link in there. You can go right to the page it's on. So
I must have that. I'm sorry.
Well, you can still, it's a good resource. You can't get CEUs for watching it, but the resources are there for both of you. Before everybody leaves, I just want to say thank you, Danny. You've become a seasoned presenter. And thank you everyone else for your participation, because that's what makes this such a great training. I'm going to remind you to check your confirmation or reminder email for full CEU requirements. Within the next hour, I'm going to send out an email to all of you with the survey link, which the survey link is in the chat right now. But I'll send that out, plus the other links that were in this presentation. And you've got 48 hours to finish. So it'll be noon on what's today, Wednesday, Friday. That's when the survey closes. You have to get 2 out of 3 correct on this content specific questions. And you can retake that survey as many times as you want to in that time frame. So you can see if you got 2 out of the 3 questions right. And if you didn't, retake it. Let's see, if you have any questions, direct those questions to the Empower Idaho email, which is in the chat just a little ways up. And the slides and recording will be available on the website in a couple of days. And thank you all for attending. We appreciate it. Have a great Halloween.
Thank you. Fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.